Marcus Chin had been warned about the wildlife on Cathara Prime. The settlement coordinator had shown him 3 full hours of safety videos before approving his transfer to the remote mining outpost. Don't approach the Vraken. Don't make eye contact with a Vraken. If you see a Vraken pack, retreat slowly and call for emergency extraction. But nobody had mentioned what to do when a Vraken cub showed up at your worksite and refused to leave. The little creature first appeared on Marcus's 3rd day working the northern drilling site. He'd been alone, running geological surveys in a canyon system 5 kilometers from the main camp. The equipment hummed steadily as Marcus marked coordinates on his data pad, completely absorbed in his work. That's when he felt the first gentle tug on his boot. Marcus looked down and froze. A Vraken cub, no bigger than a large dog, had latched its teeth onto the reinforced toe of his work boot. Its fur was the color of storm clouds, striped with silver that caught the orange sunlight. 6 legs splayed out around it as it tugged and worried at the boot like it was prey. Everything Marcus had learned screamed at him to run. Adult Vrakens were apex predators, 3 meters long with jaws that could crush titanium plating. They hunted in coordinated packs and had killed 2 surveyors in the Southern Territories just last year. A cub nearby meant adults were close, very close. But the little thing wasn't attacking. It was playing. Marcus could see it in the way the cub's tail swished back and forth, in the harmless pressure of teeth that could have easily punctured the boot's material, but didn't. The cub's large amber eyes looked up at him with something that seemed almost like mischief. Marcus made a decision that would have gotten him fired if anyone had been watching. He crouched down and gently pushed at the cub's snout. The creature released his boot immediately and made a chirping sound that seemed curious. Before Marcus could think better of it, he opened his mouth and gave the cub's fuzzy ear the gentlest nip he could manage. The cub went completely still, its eyes widened. Then it exploded into motion, jumping back and making a series of excited chirping barks. It circled Marcus twice, then bonked its head against his knee with enough force to nearly knock him over. Marcus laughed despite himself and rubbed the cub's head. The fur was surprisingly soft under his gloved hand. That should have been the end of it. Marcus finished his survey work and headed back to camp, expecting the cub to wander off to wherever its pack was denning. Instead, the little Vraken followed him, all 5 kilometers back. When Marcus tried to shoo it away, it just sat down and stared at him with those huge amber eyes until he started walking again. By the time Marcus reached the camp's perimeter, he had a problem. The cub trotted along beside him like a dog, occasionally pouncing at his shadow or wrestling with rocks. The camp's automated defenses were designed to keep Vrakens out, not in. If Marcus tried to bring it through the barrier, alarms would sound. But if he left it outside, it would either get hurt trying to follow him or attract its pack to the camp's doorstep. Marcus spent that night in one of the external equipment sheds with the cub curled against his back. The creature's body temperature ran hot, and it purred like a diesel engine when it slept. Marcus named it Thunder, because of that purr, and because he was probably going to get in a thunderload of trouble for this. Morning brought visitors. Marcus woke to Thunder's low growl and carefully looked through the shed's small window. 3 adult Vrakens stood in the clearing outside. They were magnificent and terrifying, each one large enough to bite a human in half. Their silver-striped fur rippled with muscle, and their eyes scanned the area with predatory intelligence. Marcus was certain he was about to die. This was it. He'd befriended their cub, and now they were going to tear him apart for it. He put himself between Thunder and the door, determined that if he was going down, at least the little guy wouldn't get hurt in the confrontation. One of the adults approached. Marcus could see now that it was a female, likely Thunder's mother. She was the largest of the 3, with scars across her snout that spoke of old battles. The Vraken stopped 3 meters from the shed door and sat down. Just sat there, watching. Thunder squirmed past Marcus's legs and pushed through the partially open door. He ran to his mother, chirping excitedly. The adult lowered her massive head and sniffed her cub carefully, checking for injuries. Then Thunder did something that made Marcus's blood run cold. The cub grabbed his mother's ear in his teeth and tugged, exactly like he'd done with Marcus's boot. He released it and ran back to Marcus, bonking his head against Marcus's leg before running to his mother again. The adult Vraken tilted her head, studying Marcus with frightening intelligence. Then she did something impossible. She walked forward slowly, lowered her head, and bumped her massive snout against Marcus's chest. Gently, almost carefully. When she pulled back, her eyes met his, and Marcus saw the unmistakable message there. Pack. She was acknowledging him as Pack. The other two adults approached, sniffing Marcus thoroughly. One of them, a large male with darker coloring, bumped his shoulder hard enough to make Marcus stumble. But there was no aggression in it. They were testing him, measuring him, accepting him. Over the following weeks, Marcus's life transformed into something no human had ever experienced. Thunder refused to leave his side, following him to work sites and sleeping in his quarters. The camp administrator nearly had a heart attack the first time he saw Marcus walk through the gates with a Vraken cub trotting beside him, but the data was undeniable. Vraken attacks near the northern sector had dropped to 0. When researchers reviewed security footage, they discovered why. The pack had claimed the area around Marcus's usual work sites as their territory. Any other predator that approached was driven off by 3 very protective adults. They didn't bother Marcus or his equipment. They simply kept the area safe, like guards watching over one of their own. Thunder grew quickly. Within 2 months, he was the size of a small pony and learning to hunt with the pack. But every evening, he returned to Marcus. They developed rituals. Thunder would bring Marcus gifts of strange rocks or the occasional piece of interesting bone. Marcus would inspect each one seriously and praise the cub's finds. In return, Marcus taught Thunder to recognize danger signals, like the beeping of equipment warnings or the flashing lights that meant a storm was coming. The real test came when Marcus fell. He was crossing a ravine on a maintenance bridge when the structure gave way beneath him. Marcus plunged 6 meters into a rocky stream bed, his ankle shattering on impact. Pain exploded through his leg, and his emergency beacon was smashed in the fall. He was alone, injured, and had no way to call for help. Thunder found him within minutes. The young Vraken must have been following at a distance, as always. He examined Marcus with surprising gentleness, sniffing the injured leg carefully. Then Thunder did something that still amazed the researchers who later reviewed the footage from Marcus's helmet cam. The Vraken ran, but not away. He ran toward the camp, stopping every few meters to look back and bark. 20 minutes later, Thunder returned with the pack, all 3 adults. They surrounded Marcus, and for a moment, he wondered if his luck had finally run out. Then the mother carefully, impossibly carefully, grabbed the back of Marcus's jacket in her teeth. The other 2 adults supported his body. Together, the pack lifted Marcus and began carrying him toward camp. They moved as a unit, adjusting their grip when Marcus groaned in pain, stopping when his breathing got too ragged. It took them over an hour to cover the 2 kilometers back to camp. The security team that met them at the perimeter stood frozen in shock as 3 adult Vrakens gently deposited an injured human at the gates before retreating to a safe distance. Thunder stayed. While the medics worked on Marcus's leg, the young Vraken lay beside the stretcher, purring his diesel engine purr. When they tried to shoo him away, Marcus stopped them with a single word: pack. The medical team exchanged glances, but backed off. They stabilized Marcus's leg while Thunder watched every movement with protective intensity. When they loaded Marcus into the transport to take him to the main medical facility, Thunder's distressed barks echoed across the camp until Marcus managed to stick his hand out and signal that he'd be back. Marcus spent 3 weeks in medical. His ankle required surgery and extensive regeneration therapy. Every report from the northern camp mentioned the same thing. Thunder waited at the perimeter every day, The pack brought the young Fracken food, but he barely ate. He just waited, watching the path Marcus had disappeared down. When Marcus finally returned, Thunder nearly knocked him over despite the leg brace. The young Vracken had grown even larger in those weeks, now massing close to 80 kilos of pure muscle and predatory grace. But he still chirped like a puppy and bonked his head against Marcus's chest hard enough to make the medics wince. The pack came that evening. All 3 adults. They approached Marcus one by one, bumping against him, sniffing him, confirming he was whole and well. The mother rested her huge head on Marcus's shoulder for a long moment, and Marcus wrapped his arms around her neck, feeling the trust between them. The xenobiologists who came to study the phenomenon had dozens of theories: pack bonding, imprinting protocols, behavioral adaptation. But Marcus knew the truth was simpler than their complicated explanations. He'd shown kindness to a cub. He'd played instead of feared. He'd given back the gentle nip that Thunder had offered, speaking the cub's own language of affection and play. And in that moment, in that simple gesture, he'd become something no human had been before. He'd become pack. Not through dominance or training or careful scientific protocol, through understanding, through connection, through the universal language of playfulness that transcends species and worlds. Thunder never left Marcus's side again. As the years passed and the young Fracken grew into a formidable adult himself, the bond only deepened. Marcus became known as the Pack Brother, the human who'd bridged a gap everyone thought was unbridgeable. Other humans began learning Fracken behavior patterns, building trust with other packs. But it had started with one human, one cub, and one playful bite in return. Sometimes, Marcus thought, the greatest achievements of humanity weren't acts of strength or dominance. They were acts of understanding, of meeting another being in their own language, even if that language was just play. Thunder still nipped at his boots sometimes when Marcus worked, and Marcus still nipped gently back. Pack behaviors, passed between species, kept alive by trust and affection. That, Marcus knew, was more powerful than any weapon humanity had ever created.